The Silverstone Classic continues with the Masters Endurance legends on the front of the field. Steve Tandy in the diesel Peugeot 90X with Tim and Harinja de Silva with the LMP1 Pescarolo alongside them. Michael Lyons is Lola mounted third on the grid, and Stuart Wiltshire in a Ligier LMP2 car alongside him, ahead of Crichton Lendudis in the second of the Peugeot 90Xs, and Matthew Wrigley in the Lola B07 with Mazda Power. Christoph Dansenburg in the fabulous V12 Lola Aston Martin, ahead of the second Pescarolo of Jamie Constable that had a tangle in qualifying yesterday with the number 5 ex-Nigel, Greg and Leo Mansell Zytek. But Keith Freezer and the Willis and Yerbstal Ligier P3 car are on row 5, ahead of Mike Newton in a car that he raced in period 20 years ago, 18 years ago, and pretty much non-stop ever since, the MG Lola, ahead of Adrian Watt in a more recent Duqueine. Rob Hall in a P3 Ligier, ahead of the Oreca of Mark Hickson. Anton Dansenburg in Dallara Oreca, and another P3 Ligier behind him. A couple more Ligier P3s ahead of the fastest of the GT cars, Ferrari, Mosler, Vipers, and at the tail of the field, the interesting Reynard Pro-Tran, and a bunch of Porsche and Ferraris ahead of the Aston Martin DBS9 of Niklaus Ditting, and Mike Finesse in the Courage that didn't set a time in qualifying, but that prototype out of position at the tail of the field should come through fast. Now, good to see Jamie Constable back in, because the orange and blue Pescarolo there was in the wall in qualifying after being caught out by a spin for Keith Freezer, the red 5 car that was raced in period by Nigel Mansell with his sons Greg and Leo. And that car due to be 9th on the grid, Jamie Constable in 8th spot. We saw Jamie there in the collecting area. Quite spot whether or not the number 5 car was there, but as everything heads out towards the track, there's your P3 car. So we've got a combination of open and closed prototypes, LMP1s, LMP2s and LMP3s, and IMSA Daytona prototypes, as well as GT cars, GT1, GT2 and GT3 period. So some dating right back to the turn of the century. The oldest car in the field is 2002. That is Antoine Dansenburg's Dodge Oreca. The most recent car cars will be the 2017-2018 LMP3 Ligiers. Mike Newton just going through shot in the car, as I pointed out, the MG Lola EX257, developed as a factory car for MG in their final hurrah in racing. Mike's car was run for him. Tommy Erdos, particularly often in the World Championship races. Can't remember who joined them at Le Mans. Andy Wallace at least once, maybe a couple of times. He raced that in period and has been joyfully reunited with the car since the Masters Legends series really started to take off 5 or 6 years ago. And Mike Newton enjoying racing that car ever since. And I'm sure you will still find ex-RML engineer Phil Barker in the back of the garage running that car. Well, there's one of the 2 Pescarolos in the race, the pale blue helmet of Jamie Constable. He'll be driving solo. It is, though, a pit stop race, so there are a number of cars that are 2-driver entries. And as ever, Alistair Douglas, that means we need to remind ourselves what the rules are. It's a 40-minute race, so there will be a defined pit stop window, which is
15 to 25 minutes, 10-minute window in this race. Tomorrow slightly different, so I'll tell you about that then, but 40-minute race, 15 to 25 minutes, and the cars must be stationary for 60 seconds. We're all used to that, aren't we? And also in this race we have a couple of drivers who are classed as elite, and also one who is elite, or 2 elite plus actually. An extra 20 seconds, that's quite a lot, isn't it, in a 40-minute race, for Michael Lyons in number 7 and the number 70 Marcus Jewell Ben Klukas car, and Angus Fender, who actually Ed was talking to there in the lovely Dodge Viper. A 10-second penalty for him.
Just because the car's so lovely, or
yes,
that seems rather. It just means that we get to see more of it stationary in the pit lane, so the marshals will enjoy that as well. Yeah, the Dodge Viper in its original, no, in fact in its GT2 factory colours, red and white. In its original colours, predominantly white with red and blue when it was a GT1 car. Of course, run by Shonak's Orica concern. Car developed by him, run as a factory racer. Shonak, victorious at Le Mans with Mazda. He ran the Mazda speed program for many years, so the 787B that won with Bertrand Gachot, Volker Weidler and Britain's Johnny Herbert. That was run by Uwe Shonak. Nearly won 25 years later. He was helping run the Toyota team when the Toyota expired on the final lap after nearly 30 years of trying to win Le Mans. Toyota had to wait yet another year, and that was nearly a great 25-year anniversary for Uwe Shonak, who had not won Le Mans overall in between times, but with the Vipers had won in class a number of times. And Shonak, the boss of the Orica team, still involved in prototype racing at the highest level, manufacturing cars that are the de facto fast cars in LMP2 still, and very much involved in creating cars for the new Le Mans hypercar and LMDH period. So if Group C was a super successful period for sports car racing, and indeed it was, the current hypercar regulations, which are just coming on strong, are going to see perhaps the most golden era of golden eras for sports car racing globally. Well, this is a fabulous field of cars, 31 sports prototypes, open and closed cars and GT racers from the last 20 years. So those of you who are above school age in the crowd will probably have been watching these for much of your motorsporting involvement, and for the younger members of the audience, I'm sure some will be very familiar. On pole position, Steve Tandy in the Peugeot, the diesel Peugeot that came so close again. Isn't that the story of Le Mans, to winning and just fell short? Tim De Silva, the job to try and build a lead for the old man to take over and swan through for glory. And some great liveries as well. The blue and yellow Felbermeyer Porsche, the Proton team that run that, are still 20 years plus later running cars in World Endurance Championship racing. As we get ready to start this race, 40 minutes with a mandatory pit stop in the middle of the race. We will see who comes out on top. Will it be the super fast Peugeots, or will they be outfoxed by their rivals? 40 minutes of Masters Endurance Legend racing gets underway here at Silverstone. Steve Tandy in the Peugeot 90X gets the diesel turbo wound up into the first corner ahead of Tim De Silva in the open blue and orange Pescarolo. Michael Lyons in the Lola B12 and Stuart Wiltshire in a Ligier. We're on row 2 of the grid. A nice clean start it looks like for everybody. Didn't seem to be smoke in the background as 31 cars build up to speed. They've had one lap to make sure they got heat in the tyres and the brakes. A bit of a log jam as they come through the loop. But Alistair Douglas, it looked like a pretty decent start. However, right from the get-go, Steve Tandy is not escaping. I think he's being quite cautious with that Peugeot. It's a very potent weapon.
Yes, big cars these, aren't they? So they're sort of kind of filling the track as they come through Luffield. But Steve Tandy it is who leads. But in second place, the gorgeous colours of Tim De Silva, the sort of golf colours, the light blue with the orange. And then in third place, a very quick driver indeed, Michael Lyons in the Lola B12 as they come through Copse Corner and up towards the left-hander at Maggots, and then into the Beckett's sweepers. And the downforce of the cars when the tyres are fully up to temperature, perhaps not this lap, but the speed the cars will be able to take through Beckett's will take your breath away as they come down onto the hanger straight for the first time. And 3 cars have started to break away, and it's Tandy from De Silva from Lyons as they turn into Stowe Corner.
And it's the second Peugeot, I think, up to 4th place, and that is Crichton Lendoudis. Now, he had a couple of spins in qualifying. Let's make sure that the tyres are up to temperature before you really lean on the car. The lead 2, both LMP1 cars, the closed Peugeot. LMP2 kind of went to closed cars because they were better aerodynamically, certainly in the wind tunnel and probably at Le Mans as well. But in third place, Michael Lyons in an LMP2 car. Now, that's got a less powerful engine, smaller engine, less capacity to compare to the 4.5 litres, let's say, of the Pescarolo in second place ahead of him. Mike Lyons is battling with less power in the 2-litre LMP2 car, but again, lighter weight, it was more economical, ran further on fuel. And in this race, unfortunately for him, he's got a slightly longer pit stop to deal with as well. So if he wants to stay in touch with the leaders in this Lola, then he is going to need to put in a pretty impressive first and second stint. Like the second Lola on the grid, the car driven by Mike Ridley, the white car with the green highlights. This car raced in IMSA in period, so it's got a Mazda engine, or had Mazda power. So too does the green and white B0740 of Mike Ridley, car number 18. Which was run in the IMSA WeatherTech series, the IMSA Sports Car series. But right now, the battle for the lead is all about Steve Tandy, who is really starting to feel the car a little bit more, creeping away from Tim De Silva in the Pescarolo.
And mustn't forget that if you were here yesterday, you would have seen on screen Steve Tandy having a spin at Club Corner. And so he was very much pushing that car to the absolute limit. So he will be now starting to feel those tyres coming up to temperature. Tim De Silva similarly in the car in second place. Everything's starting to feel a lot better as the gearbox warms up, the tyres warming up, the brakes warming up. So they're turning in now to Club Corner, and a great battle going on. Two very different looking cars, aren't they? The closed Peugeot to the open Pescarolo, which is coming up now into the right-hander at Abbey, into the left. They sweep through there, and then it'll be hard on the brakes for the right-hander at Village. And in fact, the Pescarolo slightly better on the brakes than Steve Tandy in the Peugeot, closes right up to within a car length.
And you get the feeling that if he could get by, Tim De Silva would be able to pull away from the Peugeot. Now, in period, that probably would not have been really that straightforward. However, he's making his speed in a different way to the Peugeot, and he looks down the inside under braking. A car light and nimble under braking, and that's a good move from Tim De Silva. It did look like he was sort of jammed up against the gearbox of Steve Tandy's Peugeot. The problem is, he needs to get away before the Peugeot can really open the taps on the straight and use that thumping torque of the engine to come hauling up behind him. But Tim De Silva already has opened up more of a margin than Steve Tandy was able to hold over him, and that's just down the length of the Heritage pit lane. So Tandy is not gone and forgotten about, but Tim De Silva now needs to get his head down and make the most of this Pescarolo's advantage, which seems to be in the medium and slower speed corners. The Peugeot, of course, designed specifically for one job and one job only, and that was to win Le Mans, and that means long, fast, wide open running. The Peugeot was more of a combative weapon to run in the Le Mans Endurance Series and to win in the European Le Mans Series, as it was in the early days before it became the World Endurance Championship. So it was more of an all-rounder, and the Peugeot definitely built for one job. So in theory, you would think on a Grand Prix circuit like this, the Peugeot might have the slight advantage, but I don't think that Tim De Silva's that interested in the theory.
No, he's focused entirely on trying to open up a gap there. We have, as we've already said, we will have a mandatory pit stop, and the De Silvas will switch. Harindra will take over the lead car, but Steve Tandy driving solo, so he will simply stay in the car as we got a battle further back here in the order.
Ligier LMP2 car, that's the orange and black car, and just behind it another of the Lolas, and behind him another LMP3 car. So a kind of combination of two different rule sets about half a decade apart. Now, I do know who the orange and black LMP3 car is, and I can't remember for the life of me now off the top of my head.
It's Andy Willis in the car
right,
at the moment. Stefan Jobstal will take that one over, the JSP3, as you say, an LMP3 car.
So that is now leading the LMP3 class, just got ahead of a P2 car. That's the P2 Lola, Bryce and Purbrick car, and again, a little bit better speed on the straight for the LMP2 car. He comes back down the inside, and we've got somebody coming misfiring past us. That needn't trouble us too much more. Some good battles going on as they come past us in the GT classes, actually. A couple of all Ferrari battles.
That's Matt Wrigley.
Now that is, so that's the Lola Mazda the BK Motorsport car that was raced in period in the IMSA series. And another problem, that's the Mosler MT900R, that's the car of Michael and Sean McInerney. And there'll be a very disappointed Martin Short watching online from some beach somewhere that's far too hot to mention. Martin Short, a great Mosler racing exponent. And Sean and Michael McInerney, that car looked like it had lots of potential in the GT field. Corvette engined, mid-mounted Corvette engine behind the driver, long before Corvette went that way with their GT cars. And you can see it even uses Corvette rear lights. Very Corvette prototype look to it, but the Mosler, a very effective GT car in its day, and more and more of them starting to come out of hibernation and being raced. But unfortunately for the McInerneys, that looks like their race is done. Again, very familiar period Lister livery there on car number 17. That's Antoine Dansenberg in the Delara Orica, so the car that would have been driven by Didier Tace and his teammates in period. And that car now, the moment we look at that, slowing down. The TDS Run Thierry LMP2 car going past them. That's again a much more recent car, and pit lane is open, and so in comes the Dodge Viper. 15, this is the Willis & Jerbstil LMP3 class leader, and the Ligier JSP3 very much the car to have in LMP3 at the moment. Originally the Orica, I beg your pardon, the Norma, which is now transmogrified into Duqueine, as Duqueine Engineering bought the rights to manufacture Normas. The French-built cars, as the Ligiers are, were initially the front runners in LMP3, but now the JSP3 has become very much the car to have. All the cars running with a mandatory Gibson engine, and so LMP3, a fast-growing development ground for drivers, for engineers, and this car wearing the purple-coloured boards that it would be racing with in the Michelin Le Mans Cup, the supporting championship to the European Le Mans Series. Tim De Silva now 2.1 seconds ahead of Steve Tandy in the Peugeot in second place, coming up behind the Felbermayr Proton Porsche. Another great period livery. That car run in period by Proton Engineering for Horst Felbermayr Senior and Junior, and Horst Felbermayr Junior's son Horst is also now racing GT cars, so the generations continue. And our leader in traffic working his way through these cars. Another LMP3 Ligier just in front of him. And the problem with the P3 cars is that they are pretty quick in a straight line, and not an awful lot slower than the LMP2 and LMP1 cars through the corners either. So a couple of pit stops already. Mike Wrigley's been in his LMP2 car, and we saw that the Dodge Viper had been in as well. Here is the race leader up behind one of the Astons. Quite a lot of Aston Martins racing here, from the earliest days of the company right through to pretty modern machinery. And again, another car comes very slowly past our pit lane. Seems to be the place for cars to be going slowly. However, leader in traffic through past the Viper comes the Peugeot as well of Steve Tandy in second place. The gap remaining, or had been remaining, fairly stable, but it looks as though Tandy is closed in traffic. Michael Lyons in third place, car number 7, that's the Lola B1280. Michael Lyons in that red and black machine. Can't quite see him in the background yet. So he has dropped further back. He's 7.7 seconds behind Steve Tandy, nearly 10 seconds behind the leader. I'm not sure that Harinder De Silva is going to consider this to be a big lead yet from son Tim. But it was out to 3.3 now, down what was at the beginning lap to 1.3 seconds, but he's certainly opened up the margin since then. So perhaps the traffic that hindered him at the end of the previous lap has hindered Steve Tandy at the beginning of this lap. I can't imagine that that's going to be much less than about 5 seconds by the time it resets itself. It's gone out to 2.7, but again, that doesn't look like the way the gap is now. So has Tandy had more trouble coming through traffic? We'll have to wait and see how that one works out.
And this is our GT leading car, which is some way back, of course, in the overall order, but no less important because GT cars in modern GT racing, the GT Pro and GT AM as it was, race alongside the top cars in Le Mans and the World Endurance Series. So the number 14 car it is, Andy Stocco, will be handing over to the very quick David McDonald in the Ferrari 458 GT3 car. A couple of versions earlier than the cars that Ferrari are using these days, but very, very successful in period. The 458 leading the class quite comfortably, actually, in the GT class, well, and about 16th or so, no, a little bit lower, 20th overall.
Well, this must be one of the very earliest Ferrari 458 GT3s. That dates from 2013, so it's now 9 racing seasons old. You can see from the windscreen strip it's recently been raced in the Blockpan GT series, or as was. But the 458 GTE is still Ferrari's frontline Le Mans weapon of choice. So the car yet to be superseded. There is a new model on the way, but the big change is going to come. We've already talked about how Hypercar is going to change the top class with Peugeot and Toyota already with cars, with Porsche coming, with BMW coming, with Cadillac coming, with Ferrari coming, with Lamborghini coming. That's going to really explode the top class of prototype racing. In 2025, a new LMP2 formula starts, so the second category of prototype racing will explode again then. But in 2023, next year, GTE goes and GT3 becomes the GT category at Le Mans and in the World Endurance Championship, and that opens the door to all sorts of other manufacturers coming. So it's not just the top category, it's not just GT changing. Either of those on their own would really herald in a huge change in the fortunes of sports car racing and its fans, but both of them coming together with a new LMP2 category coming in 2025. This is going to be some of the most exciting times in sports car racing ever. And I include Group C, I include the Cobra versus Ferrari and GT40 wars, I include all generations. At the side of the track, well, that's not a car that's come slow past us, that's Mike Furness in his Courage. Now that car didn't settle out yesterday. The car built by Yves Courage in his eponymous concern at Le Mans in the workshops there. That's several of these cars built at Le Mans. Orica have a facility at Manicourt, but they also have one at Le Mans. The Courage are built at Le Mans. The Ligier JSP3s, I think, also built at Le Mans. And the Pescarolos were built at Le Mans as well.
And another couple of GTs on our screens now. The big Dodge Viper, that's Wayne Mars. It looks like number 60 from where I'm sitting, but it's actually 160 Wayne Mars in the Dodge Viper, the enormous 8-litre engine slung out front, and he's chasing after the absolutely classic Aston Martin colours, the light dish green with the yellow nose, and that's Nicholas Ditting in the DBR9, car number 90, and Nicholas Ditting from Germany in the 2005 Aston Martin. And those cars running close together on track. Wayne Mars in 21st place, but leading his class, and Ditting also in 20th place and leading his class. So these are in sub-classes, but nice to see these GT cars running together on the road. Yeah, that 2005 DBR9, that will be a car that Darren Turner, who's here racing slightly older Aston Martins, nearly a century older Aston Martins in fact, will be very familiar with. That was something that he raced in period as the Aston Martin DBR9 started to take Aston back into the top flight of racing in the World Endurance Championship at Le Mans, and also, of course, they were racing in the American Le Mans Series with the DBR9s. The Viper behind, and behind that is the low-slung Orica. That is the car number 5, the Zytek rather,
Red 5, driven by Nigel Gregg and Leo Mansell, and behind is Christoph Dunsenborg in the fabulous Lola Aston Martin, using the V12 Aston engine that was used in their GT cars, but behind in the Lola chassis. And this was Aston Martin Racing's weapon of choice. What a fabulous looking machine it really was as well. Looked great and sounded spectacular.
And a lovely little marketing touch, wasn't it, to use the 007
yes.
Number. They had a 008 as well, and they put that on the side of the GT cars as well. I well remember the DBRs, as you say, driven by people like Darren Turner, but running 007 and 008 just gave you a warm feeling inside, didn't it?
Well, look, we've seen so many different Lolas racing already here at the Classic here at Silverstone this weekend from various different eras. And Eric Broadley and his design crew always had a sort of feel for what was a good-looking car as well as a good handling and high-performing car. And this Lola chassis with the Aston Martin engine, or with any other engine in it, it is a great-looking prototype sports racer. And of course, with the iconic Gulf colours, you can't go wrong, can you? You could put them on almost anything and it would look fabulous. But this is a great-looking car. We're not getting much of it because of our headsets here, but if you're outside at the fences around Silverstone with this car wailing past you, you know what a good car sounds like, and that is it. It's a fantastic device. Unfortunately, relatively short-lived. Aston Martin's progress in the big class, they then went on to design their own car. Big mistake, big mistake. Lots of big mistakes, like the Lotus 40, but with another couple of hundred big mistakes in it, and that kind of kiboshed their top class thoughts, and then they moved back to racing in their GT cars. But just ahead of him is car number 5, Keith Freezer, and this Zytec chassis. Zytec now, of course, better known for their engine supplies, sponsored by Beach Dean Ice Cream, and driven very briefly at Le Mans. Actually, Greg and Leo didn't get a chance to race the car. Nigel started the race and in a rainstorm crashed within 20 minutes of the start, and that was the end of the race. But they raced it elsewhere in the championship, and so Greg, Leo and Nigel Mansell together in that car. And for Nigel, it was a fantastic opportunity to go racing with the boys, and I know if you ask Martin Brundle the same question, that will be one of the days that he remembers well. Hans Stucker's raced with his sons. Derek Bell raced, of course, at Le Mans with his son Justin in the Harrods McLaren, and boy, they nearly won the race. What a story that would have been. But still fondly remembers that as one of his favourite races. So the chance to race with the kids is definitely one of those. Now, Mike Newton in the pit lane in the number 25 Lola MG EX257, a car that he raced when it was brand new, raced in period, raced at Le Mans, raced in the Le Mans series, and has been enjoying racing ever since. And as you see, Tommy Erdos' name on the side. So Tommy's not had a chance to drive this car recently, I don't think, but the Brazilian really, they were at such a good pairing, I think, with Phil Barker at the front there, maybe holding the lollipop. Certainly some of the ex-RML crew that ran this car in period will be around and about. Mike's very keen that the guys that knew it intimately are still running the car. He's had some very good results in this car. It's been, again, super reliable. The early problems that the car had all centred both in World Endurance at Le Mans and in IMSA racing on the fact that the starter motor and the alternator were one unit that was sealed in under the floor, and when it went wrong, and they went wrong frequently in the early days, the starternator, you had to get the car up in the air and take the whole floor off the car to get to it. So it was always a little bit of an Achilles heel. That was solved in later versions of the car, so hopefully Mike seems to be getting himself back underway. AER turbo motor, which was pretty much the LMP2 motor of choice for a period. There you go, out he comes. Meanwhile, back with our Peugeot 90X, and this is the man who started on pole, Steve Tandy. Now the gap has really grown, and fastest race lap for Tim De Silva 1:46.1 compared to the fastest race lap for Steve Tandy of 1:47.1. Now don't forget, Steve Tandy, current race leader, and Michael Lyons, and indeed Len Dudis and Dunsenberg and so on will be driving on their own, but Tim De Silva will hand over to his dad Harindra, so that will be a change of pace in the car. So the bigger the lead is, the more Harindra De Silva will like it, I think. I'm trying to figure out where in LMP2 this car was when it came in. This is the 65 car, Alan Purbeck and David Bryce. Lola LMP2 B090.
I think that's leading its class, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it might well be.
There are a few subclasses within, so it's difficult to spot them all on the timing screen. But this one was the overall LMP2 leader, but it is in the pits at the moment. Although actually, I think all of its competitors in that class are also in the pits, so they're all coming together.
All coming together. Now here's a livery I don't recognise, because this car raced exclusively in the Grand Am series. This is a Porsche 997 Grand Am RSR, and as you can see, with Chopard Watches sponsorship. So this car running in the GT class, and this has been driven by John Cockerton. Where is he in the overall order? Car number 11 is in 27th place and leading his class as well. So again, based on age and capacity, it's not just all your GT cars, all your LMP3s, all your LMP2s, all your LMP1s. They are in various different classes. So he too is leading his category and driving solo. So rather greedily hogging the entire 40 minutes. Mind you, if I owned one of these cars, nobody else would be getting to go either. So I suppose that's entirely fair.
The second of the Peugeots in the pit lane, Crichton Lendudis, car number 8 in the 908X, sorry, 90X. Slip of the tongue there. Not quite sure what the difference was, you may remember, but...
do you know what, it does escape me.
Yeah.
It will be some marketing nonsense. So just checking the just dropping the tyre pressure a little, perhaps, as it's got more heat in it through the stint.
Well,
trouble for one of our Ferraris.
I think that's the Pearson brothers, isn't it?
John and Gary Pearson's car.
It's unusual. And Crichton Lendudis returns to the track. That car was in 3rd place before it came into the pit lane. And still, assuming it all shakes out as it was before, it looks like Steve Tandy, Michael Lyons, we know, had to do a slightly longer pit stop, and the De Silvas showing at the moment in 5th place, but we're yet to fully unwind from their pit stop.
Yeah, absolutely right. Harindra De Silva is on his first flying lap. The 4 cars that are in front of him, Tandy in the Peugeot, Lyons in the LMP2 car, Len Dudis in the Peugeot, and Donsenberg in the Lola Aston. They're ahead of him on the timing screens because they stayed out a lap longer after he'd come in. So we'll wait to see again how that unwinds. Mike Furness in the Courage, that's the word I'm looking for. Sorry, Mike. He started last on the field. Oh no, in real trouble.
Just got in the car, Harindra De Silva, father of Tim, who started the car, and that was our leader before the pit stops, and a problem for the Pescarolo. What a shame. It's great to see that car out. Very, very well driven. You can see who drove it in period on the side of the car. Yeah,
I'm now trying to think. Jacques Hu, Olivier Hu, and Alexandre Hu. I don't know. I don't know. Raced, as you can see from the sticker, in the Intercontinental Le Mans Cup. So that was the sort of global forerunner of the European Le Mans Series stroke World Endurance Championship. It's all sort of separated and re-amalgamated over the years. So, unfortunately, any chance of a Pescarolo victory at Silverstone, and it might not be the first ever Pescarolo victory at Silverstone. They may well have won here before with cars like that or the closed coupes, but it does look very much as though we're going to have a Peugeot win. And I'm going to have a very quick Google of something that I should have looked up less yesterday evening.
Might you have said in a contemporary Le Mans commentary that you were looking forward to a Peugeot win one or 2 years there, Martin? Very dangerous to say that.
Yeah, well, I have to say, a number of years it looked like it was highly likely and didn't happen. However, of course, of all the teams that have got heartbreak stories about winning Le Mans, nobody trumps Toyota.
Absolutely not, no.
Well, not for overall victory, but WRT a couple of years ago got further round the last lap before the car broke down. Toyota retired at the line, or broke down at the start of the last lap in the battle for LMP2 honours a couple of years ago. The WRT car that was going to win and comfortably broke down in the S's. So, yeah, there are lots of hard luck stories at Le Mans. Jamie Constable here, being flashed by Michael Lyons. And that rapid flashing, that is a sort of predetermined flash. You hit a button and then the headlights flash. They were restricted legally, not just to flash incessantly, but to, I think, 5 flashes in a row. There you go. And there again, the 33 car, the the Ferrari is going again. Was it the McInerney's and the Ferrari? The Pearsons in the car. I knew it was a family car.
I think started by John and handed over to Gary, so presumably it's Gary on board if they've done their pit stop.
Has he done a bit? Well, they must hopefully have done their pit stop because the window's closed, so I'm not sure if he's done a bit of mechanicking or just done the familiar Control-Alt-Delete that you have to do with everything that doesn't work, that's not thrown a rod out of bed. Now then, here's another of our Ligier LMP3 cars, car number 52, and this car is in 4th place in the P3 category. We haven't talked about them for a moment or two, for a while actually. The 52 car, where did they start on the grid? Oh, I've got 2 grids and no entry list, so that car started in 16th place, the Davison Maiden car. And coming up behind a very distinctive Red Bull liveried Ferrari, which I'm now immediately trying to remember who drove that in period, and again, I should know things like that. Absolute disgrace that my memory lasts about half an hour.
Well, I take no credit for this. It's all down to our researcher Cameron and Google. But those 3 names we saw on the side of the car in the pit lane: Alexandre Primat, Jacques Nicolet, and Olivier Pla.
Okay, so Jacques Nicolet is the French businessman who bought Pescarolo, or the fire sale of Pescarolo, if you like, and handed Henri Pescarolo the keys back, and then took over the concern when Henri decided to stop running the team as Pescarolo. And so Nicolet then became Oak Racing, who built their own cars and built Morgan, and his firm still continues to build cars in the same workshops at Le Mans. So Jacques Nicolet is a man who's been very instrumental in the last 10 years in producing not just teams but sports car racers as well, and has raced himself. 44, the green and Glover Ligier LMP3, and there's a livery actually of all the LMP3 cars. I'm sure I would recognise one that looked like it was in 1980s Ragno Arrows colours. I don't recall seeing that car, so couldn't tell you who ran that in period. When was it racing? 2017. I should know. Martin, you should know these things, but I'm afraid it all rather eludes me. LMP3 is such a far-flung category. So many teams have run different cars for different driver lineups, and that's not one, I'm afraid, that I immediately remember. Sun's starting to head behind the clouds. It's just starting to get a little feel with the headlights on of heading into the dusk. I mean, it's the perfect time, really, for endurance racing cars to be out there. The headlights are on, the bright sunshine of the afternoon is gone, and it's starting to get that little witching hour feel like at Le Mans. Stuart Wiltshire, car number 50, 2016 Ligier LMP2 car, because Ligier were very much a force in LMP2 as well, but the car was kind of outdated as the Oreca 05 became the Oreca 07, and that has very much become the dominant force in LMP2. So the Ligier LMP2 cars are no longer really current front runners. Only one team running a Ligier in LMP2 in the World Endurance Championship at the moment. the rest of the LMP2 front running fields, probably on both sides of the Atlantic actually, are in Orica chassis. Again, going by the Felbermeyer Porsche.
And we've got a battle building up for the lead, which we've got 8 minutes to go. It's 23 seconds between them, so it's a long shot for Jamie Constable, who, if you were here yesterday in qualifying, and we repeated it in the build-up to this race, Jamie Constable, through no fault of his own, ended up in the barriers at Club Corner. Here he is now, the number 99 Pescarolo. So he's upholding Pescarolo honours now, and he's chasing after Steve Tandy in the Peugeot 90X. The last lap he did was fully 3.5 seconds quicker than Steve Tandy, the leader. So there's a possibility that we could have a change for the lead in the last dying minutes of the race.
Has our timing screen updated itself? Because it still says that Constable and Mike Lyons are on outlaps. Oh, a blow up for the Dodge Viper. That's very bad news indeed, I'm afraid. Well, we've heard of the curse of the commentator. I'm not sure I've ever heard of the curse of the collecting area announcer, but Ed's favouritism for the Viper has not paid dividends for them. Now, the Union flag on the side, I wonder why that would have been. It's in factory PlayStation livery. Why would it wouldn't have been a Hugh Chamberlain run car. It's in the Orica factory colours. I'm not quite sure. However, here's our race leader as the Viper pulls off in smoke at the side. The end of the race for Angus Fender. So at least the noise has stopped. But with 6.5 minutes remaining, I'm sure he would have happily endured that all the way through to the end of the race. And Steve Tandy leading from Jamie Constable. Michael Lyons in third place in his Lola, and in fourth place in the Zytek 09 is Keith Fraser, car number 5, red 5, the blue car, the blue open prototype. And there, hopping over the barriers, is Angus Fender. Now, unfortunately, not quite sure why the car stopped, but it does seem to have trailed a bit of oil there into its hiding place. So that's not good news for them.
I think that was Wayne Mars, was it?
Oh, was it Wayne Mars? Yeah, it may well have been, actually.
I think the Dodge Viper that retired was Wayne Mars, the fruit stall market trader from London.
Now
races every weekend. We're looking now at Michael Lyons.
Yeah. Under pressure from Crichton Lendoulis, who's not the car immediately behind, but who is the blue and white roofed car, 2 cars behind. The Peugeot closing right up on Michael Lyons in the closing stages. They were just 0.8 of a second apart, but Lyons has been very nippy through traffic. You'd see the Peugeot there in the background of the shot coming steaming down the inside. Does he get through safely? Lendoulis had a big spin there in qualifying, being a little more cautious, I think, this time. Lyons runs out wide, takes the sweeping line out of Luffield and down the Heritage Straight. I suppose we call it that because it's now the Heritage Pit Straight maybe. So Michael Lyons just earning himself a little bit of breathing space. Here's the car he's trying to chase, but it's 7 seconds up the road. This is the number 5 car of Keith Fraser, the Zytek. So Zytek engine builders and chassis constructors trying to remember now exactly who designed the car for them, but it was run in period at Le Mans by or for Nigel Mansell and the boys. That was, I'm trying to remind myself, 2009 that car dates back to. Gosh, I was going to think maybe 2011. 2009, that's a long while ago, isn't it? Well, great to see the car back on good form and running in third place. It's also leading its category in LMP1.
And I think Jamie Constable, his chase goes on of Steve Tandy, but I think Steve Tandy's had a pit board hung out to him saying, press on a little, Steve, you need to, because Jamie's coming up fast. So the gap remains at around 20 seconds, which now, with only 3.5 minutes to go, is a very long shot for
and that's
Jamie.
the real problem, actually. If they've said, you know, hurry up, then actually that's what they ought to have said to Steve Tandy is easy. You know, plus 20 and 3 laps to go, or yeah, 2 laps to go maybe. So just don't stress in traffic. You've got a big cushion to the car behind you. Yes, Jamie Constable might be coming quicker, but Tandy has that initial advantage.
The whispering diesel coming out of club.
Again, when the diesels first arrived at Le Mans, you didn't have a sort of big howling, wailing engine coming towards you. You can remember seeing the first laps of practice with the Audi diesels at the Porsche curbs. You never heard them coming. It was just like a low-flying jet had suddenly roared past you. All you got was wind rush and tyre noise. A very disconcerting feeling for the drivers as well. Adrian Watt there in a Duqueine. Oh, what now, Martin? Well, Duqueine Engineering took over the Norma concern, and so in what would have been, actually when it was built I think would have been a Norma, is now renamed a Duqueine. Duqueine Engineering as a team, very, very successful in LMP3, and Gilles Duqueine and his team taking over the Norma concern and are now building LMP3 cars as Duqueines. And just in front of them, the TDS Racing run LMP2 car. And we've got pressure from behind as well. So the Thierry TDS car is an Oreca 03, one of the early generation of Oreca LMP2 cars. That red and grey machine being driven by Stuart Wilkes, being driven by, beg your pardon, by Mark Heekson, car number 46. And again, Pierre Thierry sponsoring TDS Racing to this day in LMP2, so very much a factor. Car number 14, the black Ferrari, leading its class in GT3, the Stoko McDonald car, and that now up to 17th. Where did they start on the grid? 17th. So despite all the trials and tribulations of those ahead, and I thought this car had gone by the board early on, doesn't seem to be going very quickly again, the Lola Mazda, the ex-BK Motorsport car. In fact, going so not quickly that the Ferrari breezed by it, which had the Lola been healthy would definitely not have been the case. And does he come out? Well, Mike Newton's gone by him. Mike Newton in the NG Lola behind. So where is Mike Newton overall? Mike Newton also leading his class in LMP2, a slightly older version of LMP2. Mike Newton up to 9th place overall. And here is our race leader. We're on the final lap. Just 30 seconds remain on the clock of this 40-minute race. Temperature is dropping as well. Can feel it in the commentary booth here. I'm sure those of you who've been out around the circuit all day, particularly the marshals and the track workers, will be very, very relieved that the real burning heat of the day has gone. And probably the cars will respond well to it as well. Steve Tandy will make the best of this final lap to enjoy driving this fabulous device. Not too often you get to drive a real high-tech, top-spec Le Mans racer like this. This was absolutely state-of-the-art, within almost touching distance of where we are now. Steve Tandy in this car that raced at Le Mans and very nearly won just over a decade ago. Peugeot then, of course, did go on to win Le Mans and have returned with their brand new hypercar as well. So Peugeot back in the top flight of sports car racing. They came and raced after Le Mans at Monza for the first time. Thought maybe Le Mans was not the best place to try a car out. Steve Tandy, though, in the Peugeot claims victory here at Silverstone. And in the end, despite the efforts of Tim and Herenja da Silva in the Pescarolo, it is not their car, but that of Jamie Constable, who takes second place, and that's a great reward for the team that had to do probably a fair amount of work on it after a crash in qualifying. So at 11.8 second margin of victory. In the end, Tandy did take it very easy on the final lap as Jamie Constable pushed on. Jamie only 6/10 away from his fastest lap. Mike Lyons coming up behind Mike Newton after a second pit stop. That Mazda misfiring badly, isn't it, up behind the MG Lola. So Lola Mazda passes a Lola AER. And is Mike Newton already taken the checkered flag, or did he just head off into the pit lane by mistake? Something very odd happened there. He went round the longer, tighter bit of Club Corner, having been dive bombed by Michael Lyons coming through at the line. So Michael Lyons didn't gain a place there. He was already in third place. Mike Newton might perhaps have a word or two with him, saying that was entirely unnecessary. You were in third, you weren't going to be second, you weren't going to be caught for fourth place, and you left me with nowhere to go on the last corner of the last lap. As it is, Mike Newton comes across the line. He will be 8th and wins his class. And in fourth place, Keith Fraser in the blue number 5. Zytek, 5th, Crichton Lendudis in Peugeot number 8, a car it would have run with in period. And no! The Red Bull Ferrari is giving up the ghost on the final lap. That's not good news, is it? Was that car not leading its class as well? I'm not sure if it was or not, but whatever, it is struggling to get through to the line. 144, Christopher Compton Goddard in
it is leading its class.
Red Bull Ferrari. Well, it needs to make it to the line. Who is second in that class?
I think.
No, I don't. The car that was second was the Viper. So I think if he makes it to the line, then he will be the class winner. And he's going to do that if he has to do it on the starter motor.
Yes, Chris Compton Goddard races various Ferraris. Very enthusiastic racer, and just trying to, as you say, in fact, if it
come on baby,
just about going to make it, it's a little bit uphill here, so he needs to have a little bit of momentum. That's
almost the perfect race car. Was it Colin Chapman who once said that the perfect Formula 1 car would fall apart as it took the checkered flag? They're built to do exactly that and no more. That looks like we're looking at another class winner here, the 90 Aston Martin. And just ahead of that, yet another of our clear class winners, the Stokoe and McDonald Ferrari. So Aston Martin number 90, Niklaus Ditting, winning, for your information, the G1 group, which was the earlier group in GT1. So that Aston Martin was in GT1, as was one of the Dodge Vipers. And Viper then stepped down to GT2 later in its career. The Aston Martin at that stage, ProDrive of course had built the Ferrari 550 Maranello to take on Corvette in the American Le Mans series, and then their success with that car, which was not factory based or built at all, was in fact built from a Ferrari 550 road car that they bought on Christmas Eve out of the classifieds in the Sunday Times. That spurred Ferrari on into developing the 575 Maranello, and ProDrive went on to develop the DBR9 for Aston Martin Racing. Well, there is the second place driver, our second finisher, the 99 car, who came in behind our race winner. Let's take a look then at the result. The pole man for the Masters Endurance Legends at the Classic at Silverstone, Steve Tandy, claiming victory after an up and down race where the Pescarolos got the better of him. Tim De Silva leading early, only to retire. Jamie Constable coming through in the repaired Pescarolo that crashed in qualifying. Michael Lyons finishing third in his Lola Mazda. Keith Fraser in the ex-Mansell's Zytek in fourth, ahead of the second Peugeot of Crichton Lendudis, and Stuart Wiltshire in the top LMP2 car in his Ligier in sixth place. The Lola Aston of Christoph Dantenberg ahead of the LMP2 Lola of Mike Newton, the Price Burbeck Lola, and the Joule and Clucas Ligier, the top LMP3 car in the field. So our winning GT car, the 458 GT3 of Stokoe and McDonald, Niklaus Ditting in his Aston Martin DBR9, an older GT1 car, also winning in his category. A whole host of different class battles going on throughout the race, and finally our field making it through, with just a couple not getting to the end. Racing from the late afternoon into the early evening, a taste of Le Mans over the 21st century. GT cars and prototypes from the last 20 years of sports car racing internationally, with the Peugeot at the front of the field. Lots of close battles between the prototypes, LMP1, LMP2, LMP3s, and between the GTs, GT1s, GT2s, GT3 cars. And as ever, the car's been driven right on the limit. Fantastic sights and sounds. The early front runners, Tim and Harinder de Silva, went west. A little off-track excursion there, not enough to stop Steve Tandy in the Peugeot regaining the lead. Fabulous sights and sounds with the headlights on, heading into the evening. And Steve Tandy taking a Peugeot victory at Silverstone.